Hello class, my name is Danielle Ott, and today I will be presenting my Europe mapping project on the correlation between the European population under the age of 15 and how it relates to the European refugee population. So with beginning this project, I had to decide what was important to me, what I was passionate about, and how I could channel that passion into an educational and informative mapping project to share with you here today. So therefore, I came to the following problem statement, which reads on the screen. If there is a correlation between the European population under the age of 15 years old and the European population of those claiming refugee status. So both populations are also listed on the screen here. You can see the total European population under 15 as well as the total European population of refugees. As you can see by this graph right here, the total European population under the age of 15 is significantly greater than the European refugee population. With that being said, there is still valuable information and data to gain by looking at the relationship between the two and seeing where or if they correlate and how. The population is obviously greater than the refugee population. Here is a line graph that shows the data in actual comparison, broken down by country along the horizontal axis and the number of people along the vertical axis. I thought it was important to highlight the highest and lowest under 15 population in each country of Europe. So the top 3 highest under 15 population and the top 3 lowest under 15 population are listed on the slide. Previous slide also indicated the highest and lowest for under 15, and the new slide indicates the highest and lowest refugee population for the refugee population in Europe. So what is a refugee? I think it's important for us to define the refugee before we get into the maps. As the slide reads, a refugee is defined as a person who has been forced to leave their country of origin in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. Europe is known in their socialist state to provide and offer benefits and asylum to refugees who flee their home countries in hopes of a new, safer, and better life. The European Union even pledged to take immediate action to prevent further losses of life for the refugees and to improve conditions for those seeking refugee protection in Europe. A refugee is not the same as a migrant person. A migrant is a person who makes the conscious choice to leave their country to seek a better life elsewhere. Refugees are forced to leave their country because they are at risk of or have experienced persecution. The concerns of refugees are human rights and safety, not economic advantage. They leave behind their homes, most or all of their belongings, family members, and even their friends. Some are forced to flee with no warning and may have experienced significant trauma or have been tortured or otherwise ill-treated in their home countries. The journey to safety is fraught with hazards, and many refugees risk their lives in search of protection just knowing that anything could be better than the life they were already living. They cannot return to their home countries until the situation that forced them to leave improves for the sake of their well-being. On this slide right here, you can see a picture, quite jarring picture of exactly what it looks like when refugees seek a new home country. So they just pack into these boats and just of hopes that there has to be something else out there. So why is this important? Understanding the relationship between the youth population and the refugee population in Europe is important and definitely worth researching. Countries within Europe who have opened their borders to host refugees have experienced both positive and negative side effects on their economic, political, social, and environmental states of being. And using this mapping project as a fuel in order to further my research definitely helped me to narrow down exactly what that meant. These impacts definitely come from the following 3 factors: the political economy of the hosting countries, the urban and rural interactions, and the nature of the relationship between the host country and the refugees that they allow in. Researching and understanding more about this connection between these 2 ideas will help to make better political and social decisions within Europe. So this slide right here shows the map of Europe organized by location quotient of the under 15 population in Europe. The legend along the side shows which color represents which location quotient and how they relate to each other along the numbering scale. This map features a title, the north arrow for directional purposes, and the scaling tool along the bottom in the left-hand corner. You can see that within the map, the location quotient is highest for Ireland and Iceland in regards to the under 15 population. The middle range, highlighted in orange, yellow, and green, shows the normal location quotient. It is exceptionally low for countries such as Gibraltar and Monaco. This next map that you see on your screen is a map of Europe, organized by location coordinate of the refugee population in Europe. The legend along the side shows the colors that represent which location coordinate and how they relate to each other along the numbering scale. This map also features a title, a north arrow for directional purposes, and the scaling tool along the bottom in the left-hand corner. You can see within this map that the location coordinate is highest for Sweden and Malta in regards to the refugee population. The middle range, highlighted in orange and yellow, shows the normal location coordinate. It is exceptionally low for countries such as Albania and Portugal. So what is a location coordinate? A location coordinate is basically a way of quantifying how concentrated a particular industry, cluster, occupation, or demographic group is in a region as compared to the entire nation. It can reveal what makes a particular region unique in comparison to the national average. So, for an example, a location coordinate of 1.0 in such as the mining industry would mean that the region and the nation are equally specialized in mining. A location coordinate of 2.8 means that the region has a higher concentration in mining than the nation. And location coordinates can be calculated from any industry, not just mining, obviously, where comparable data exists for two different areas. So, the refugee asylum story in Europe gives much of a background as to why the data is the way that it is. An asylum is defined as a protection that's granted by a nation of people who have left their native countries because of political danger. The European Union pledged to take immediate action to prevent further losses of life and to improve conditions for those seeking protection in Europe. The system sets out minimum standards and procedures for processing and assessing asylum applications and for the treatment of both asylum seekers and those who are actually granted their refugee status. The system that allows this to function in Europe is known as the CEAS. The CEAS does lots of different things, but just for a couple examples on this slide, it ensures the right of the refugees under the international laws are protected, and also each European country has their own asylum system under this organization and this system. There are some particular jarring facts about refugees, especially ones who have learned to call Europe their second home. So just a couple right here. Turkey is currently home to more Syrian refugees than anywhere else in the world. At least 1.5 million people are expected to reach the European shores before the end of 2015, which actually happened. The current surge in migration to the European Union is rapidly becoming the largest and most complex facing Europe since the Second World War. So Europe is facing the most serious migration crisis since the end of the Second World War. This massive refugee influx, fleeing turmoil in Africa and the Middle East, has greatly increased during the last year, introducing complex challenges for Europe. There are several reasons why migrants go through the Mediterranean Sea and how it has increased dramatically. Some of these include the post-Arab Spring social instability, their human rights violations, and the security problems from North Africa, the fall of the dictatorship in Libya and Tunisia, which was a backstop for the sub-Saharan African migrants, the ISIS advance in Syria and Iraq, and the recent proxy war in Yemen, as well as the conflict in Caucasus and its complicating further security situations. This geographical map of Europe shows how refugees seek home in Europe. The 6 main routes, as highlighted on the map, include the Eastern Land Route, the Western Balkan Route, the Eastern Mediterranean Route, the Central Mediterranean Route, the West African Route, and the Western Mediterranean Route. These are the most common ways that non-natives learn to call Europe home. These routes include land, boat, through the treachery of Africa, and even through some unknown means that were just impossible to map out. There's definitely a solid connection between how the European refugee crisis is important to me and also important to Europeans. Within the socialist continent, the young and under 15 population considers human rights to be almost equally as important as they do technology and a modern-day work style. Being of the millennial generation, young Europeans are very considerate and passionate about refugees and basic humanitarian rights. So there's definitely a solid connection between the young European population and the refugee population in Europe. As more than half of the refugees around the world are children and suffer circumstances which we can just not comprehend, they need to call somewhere safe home. Europe is socially responsible for ensuring the safety and security of their refugees. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to hearing other presentations, and I hope you all have a good night.